It's Super Bowl week in the NFL, and it's time for episode 69 of the Winning Youth Coaching Podcast.
Is your day job more of a paycheck and coaching your true passion? Are you ready to hear awesome stories, ideas, and tips from the best youth sports coaches around? Are you, the mom or dad coach, ready for everyone on your teams to have an awesome youth sports experience? Are you ready to bring home the W? The Winning Youth Coaching Podcast starts now. Here's our host, Craig Hayworth.
All right, Youth Coaching Nation. Thanks for listening to the show today and getting involved at Winning Youth Coaching. Be sure to listen in at the end of the episode to find out more about what we're up to. Also, you can find detailed show notes at winningyouthcoaching.com/podcasts. We also have made it easier. If you're listening to the show and not in front of your computer, you can now just text your email address to us to sign up for our awesome weekly coaching tips. Listen in at the end of the show to find out how. I'm excited to be joined today by Robert Murphy from WrestlingWithCharacter.com. Robert, thanks so much for jumping on with us. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing good, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. We're excited to have you. I appreciate you reaching out to me and us connecting. I think we have a lot of the same passions for having coaches do a great job and be passionate about what they do and love your story. So excited to jump into that with our audience. So let's just dive right in. As a reminder, keeping with our coaching theme, the show is broken up into 4 quarters that are about 8 minutes long each. I heard the whistle blow. It looks like first quarter is getting started. So let's just jump right in. Robert, if you could, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and then I'd love for you to kind of share your story with how you got involved with youth sports and kind of what age you started, and then how that affected your pursuit of what you loved and wrestling and football. Just share that story with us a little bit.
Yeah, sure, Craig. And at first, I wanted to say real quick again, I appreciate you having me on, and not only. I'm also a big fan of the podcast. I've been listening for quite a while, and I really, really get a lot of great information from the coaches you have. And so I appreciate what you're doing out there and helping spread some of these messages. But
awesome. I appreciate you saying that.
But just getting into my story, I think it's unique. But I'm the founder and director of, like you said, Wrestling with Character, which is it's a unique program. We're based out of Omaha, Nebraska here. And more importantly, I should say, I am a husband and a father. I have 2 little boys here, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old sons. But as far as my experience in coaching, it's really kind of been, a tale of 2 sides. I was a college wrestler. I wrestled through high school. Was fortunate enough to have a good college career wrestling, and competition was obviously my main focus. I really didn't even have my eye on coaching for a long time, but I got to about my 3rd year of college, and I guess I found out they weren't going to let me major in wrestling, so I had to pick something, and it just kind of came about by when you're a broke college kid and on a sports team, you do a lot of these camps to try to earn some extra money for the weekend or whatever you need, and so I ended up doing a lot of wrestling camps, and it just that's I guess when the bulb came on that this was something that I really, really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the kids that would come, and they'd come from one, and they'd come to one of our meets, and that they would remember me, and it was just really fulfilling. And so that's when I kind of made the first decision to go that route. And so I did actually end up getting my bachelor's degree in health and physical education, kindergarten through 12th grade. So I was really set on going that route, being a coach, being a teacher. And then, as you know, life has a way of throwing things at us and taking us in different directions. And so I actually never did go into a teaching career. I graduated. I spent about a year subbing, and I did go directly into coaching. So I did help coach high school wrestling for a couple years as I was kind of trying to find my way and figure out what I wanted to do as far as a career. And I ended up landing in a pharmaceutical sales position, which I've been doing for the last 10 years. And so as that responsibilities kind of increased with that role, I ended up actually taking a break from wrestling. I had the young kids going on, family, and started getting more work responsibilities. And I just had to stop. I didn't have enough time to do it all. And which was really, I think, the best thing for me. There was about a 3-year gap there when I didn't have anything to do with wrestling, really. I wasn't coaching. I kind of kept an eye on it from afar. And at that time, spending a lot more of my energy just being a good dad, trying to take care of my kids. And I was still involved with coaching, but it was, 4 and 5-year-old soccer, basketball, football, these things. And it gave me a much different perspective, I think, that I bring back now as I come back into the world of wrestling on what the big picture is. I just had some different realizations there about, how to connect and how to approach these young kids with really, a different mindset as a teacher, more from than just being that hard-nosed wrestling coach with this, win-win-win attitude, and really getting a better idea about what matters more. And so fast forward about 2 years ago, my oldest son started kind of showing some interest in wrestling. So that's what brought me back into the sport. And it was just almost immediately I was refreshed, recharged with this new perspective, and it's just ready to roll and get things going. And so for about the last year and a half, I helped out with another wrestling team here in town. And then just recently here in August, I decided to take a big leap and go ahead and make my own program to really, just because of some ideas I have of doing things a different way. And I really, at the core of it, I think that there's some fundamental issues with the culture of youth wrestling, and I really want to do my part to address those and take some steps to make them better.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I love a lot about what you're going on. I appreciate you being on. I'm pretty sure you're my first wrestling coach I've had.
Oh boy!
Yeah, so
pressure.
Actually, no pressure, man. There's everybody. You'll be just teaching us the new ways. No, that's great stuff, and I really, I thank you for walking down that story because it is really interesting, and how kind of the curveballs life throws us. But what you talked about, how healthy it probably was that you ended up being able to coach kind of at that youth level and really see the pure joy of kindergartners and first graders versus that, maybe more a high school or college mentality, because it's hard to switch that. I've talked to a lot of athletes that, maybe come right out of college and then go take a GA position or end up coaching right away at a high level in high school or college, that they kind of, like you said, it's that win-win-win mentality. But then once you take a step back and have kids of your own or coach at that younger level, it really does change your perspective on things. And you really realize most of the parents don't really care that much about the winning. They care more about their kid having a fun, great team experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and they should, at least. If they don't, they should.
Right.
And so
exactly.
No, absolutely. I do think that where I'm at today in my philosophies as a coach, really, I wouldn't change anything. I think it's good to have both of my experiences, both sides. I really kind of break them into my before and after the break. But, I think everything ties together for a reason to get me where I'm at today.
Exactly. Now, so what were you, and being a wrestling coach, if you had 2 daughters instead of 2 sons, what were you gonna do with your time, man?
Well, that's funny. I would still end up being a wrestling coach at some point because I'm just passionate about the sport. I've spent so much time in it, and I really just believe in the values. Now, one thing to say, I guess, first off, is wrestling with girls is a growing sport. So it's not impossible to say that they'd be on the mats with us. I've coached several young girls, and some of these girls can put a whipping on some of these boys. You'd be surprised. But female wrestling is an Olympic sport now. So it is becoming more and more accepted. But with that said, I probably wouldn't be involved to the level that I am, especially not this early, as they were still developing and competing. To be honest, I don't know how involved. I would probably be involved from a coaching standpoint, whether it was gymnastics or, because I think teaching is teaching, and I think, I can learn the skills, good enough to teach at a basic level. Once they decided if they wanted to get more serious and to a higher level, I would obviously turn it over to a more experienced coach. But, I'd be with them. I'd be supporting them. I'd be doing whatever I had to do to be involved. That'd be the most important thing. And, to put that in some perspective is my 2 sons, my son Jack is 9 years old. He's a 3rd grader. He's wrestled for about 2.5 years, but he's only wrestled in 1 tournament. And my youngest son, Sam, he's been wrestling for, about 6 months now, and he hasn't wrestled in any tournaments. So to me, it's more of, them coming along, enjoying it, as far as for the purity of the sport, learning the martial arts part of it, and not so much the competition. So if Jack tells me tomorrow he's done, he doesn't like it, wants to try something else, that's no problem. I'm going to keep moving forward with what I'm doing. So this is something I think that would happen regardless. But who knows? Maybe not.
Yeah, right. No, that's a very healthy approach. Is to let them choose where their passion lies. So that's good stuff. So have you've actually coached them a little bit. You got any funny stories? I love hearing stories about parents coaching their own kids. So you got any good moments or funny moments?
Well, yeah, and I've coached them, and like I mentioned, several sports. Soccer is the one that keeps coming to mind because it seems like that's the one I've done the most. And was some of the other ones I usually try to be the head coach, where I just am the the guy that has to organize and keep them in line and stop messing with each other. But overall, it's been a great experience. And I know I hear different things about this. There's kind of across the board as far as people's philosophies and where they stand on it. But I think it's all about your relationship with your child is important. And I think you do have to acknowledge and address it. And it's harder the younger they are for them to kind of make that separation. And so in some of those circumstances, you kind of got to be a little careful how you're handling them at practice and in games. But, I guess the other thing is my kids are so young, I haven't gotten to the real stressful, parts of the competition where maybe it could start to affect more. But I think also it's important to differentiate wrestling versus soccer because or other sports in general. I just think wrestling is very unique because it's so physical and it's such a personal experience out there that it is hard for a parent or a coach not to let themselves get emotionally invested in it and take their eye off maybe the ball as far as what we're actually trying to accomplish here. Because it's interesting that I'm the first wrestling coach on this podcast, I'll say, because if there's a sport, especially in youth sports, that needs more of the positive, ideas and influences that a lot of the coaches you have on this podcast, it's the sport of wrestling, because it is just madness at these little kids tournaments that I go to every weekend, where it's just it's just a pure form of competition where it's hard to say that you're going to have this separation. But I've even found with my own son in wrestling, that's way easier said than done, because you see them out there struggling and, crying and being uncomfortable, and some kids just, being physical and pushing them around, and it's really hard to take that step back. But, I think getting back to the question, I think you have to have that conversation and just kind of try to draw that line that, when, I'm going to love you no matter what, but when we're here, I'm the coach, you're the athlete. And I really think I do a good job of treating my kids the same as I treat the other kids. So I try not to overreact or treat them any differently. I think they can kind of sense that, but I don't think it comes as natural to them, where it takes them a little bit, maybe throughout the season or even throughout a practice, for them to kind of remember, oh yeah, this is coach, not dad here, and I need to, fall in line and act how I would if it was my teacher or my PE teacher or a coach or somebody else that's giving me direction. But another thing that works too is some of our kids just don't respond the same way to mom or dad, and there's just that disconnect there. And so we do have some of my assistant coaches and us that have had talked about making sure that we're covering each other's backs, and that maybe if one kid's not responding well to his dad being the coach or showing him something, and that we just kind of come over and say, hey, will you go, maybe mention this to him or something like that. And that's been pretty effective too for most of us.
Yes, I think that's a very wise philosophy. And like you said, it depends on the kid. I never really needed to do that much with my son, but there were other assistant coaches on our teams who very much needed to do that. It's very much just depending on the kid and the relationship. And there's, no wrong or right. It's just the way. It's sometimes just wisdom as a coach. You can see things that where you just need to step in or let, get kind of a fresh set of eyes on it to kind of take any family tension out of it. So that's a very wise thing.
You see both ends of the spectrum. You see the coach who's on his kid, riding him the whole practice, and you also see the coach who maybe does a disservice by going the other way and not giving his kid the attention because he doesn't want to show favoritism or have those conflicts. So it's hard to balance it. It is.
It really is. Well, good stuff. Let's, as we kind of finish up the first quarter here, it sounds like you've had a pretty good balance and kind of, the way you stepped into coaching, but I love just talking to coaches about kind of their evolution, because usually when we're, young and right out of college, we think we know it all, and you already mentioned that maybe winning probably would have been too big of a priority, but anything else as you kind of look back over the years of coaching, any, and cringe moments or anything when you look back on if you could do it over again now, anything you'd do differently?
Well, oh gosh, yeah, there's definitely things I would do differently. But But that's always relative too. I'm a big believer in things happen for a reason and learning from our mistakes. And so, sometimes you can say that, but if I did do that differently, maybe I wouldn't have learned a lesson that's helping me out today. So I mean, not necessarily anything cringeworthy, but I'm still pretty young in my coaching career, I'll say. So there might be some things that come along, but and like I kind of alluded to earlier, I really kind of look at my coaching career in these two separate halves up to this point, where I've really changed my philosophy, and now my actions and the program I put into place are really showing what I believe now and how I want to do things, and really just getting back to the purity of the sport, and trying to focus around that, and just believing in the growth experience for everyone. But just the big thing is just having my motivation and my priority shift from having that ego-driven winning mentality, which is just abundant in youth sports and wrestling in particular, where I see so many of these dads and coaches are just really pushing these kids too hard, too fast, and it ties back to their ego, and taking that away and putting my focus on just developing these kids to be the best of each kid can be. That's been a huge shift in my overall thinking, because wrestling's unique. Or not any sports. Any of us that are athletes, I think everybody retires at some time with regrets, regardless of your level of success. So I mean, even if you're an NCAA champion, you have something in the back of your head that says, I should have been two-time champion, or I should have been an undefeated champion, or even if you have a gold medal, I should have got 2 gold medals. So there's always this higher level that someone didn't achieve. And I think once you get that perspective, it helps you come to peace with your own achievements and what you got done, and really look back and have a different mindset about just appreciating what you were able to do and not focus on what you didn't get accomplished. It's very hard to let that obsession go to be great. It's a little dopamine fix we get when we get that success, and someone, we win and we're getting pat on the back, and truly, honestly letting go of that and making the shift to have your decisions based off of, some firm guiding principles in line with, your mission, how you want to live your life. It's hard to do. It's easier said than done. I think that's where there's a big disconnect in youth sports, with people aren't really honest with themselves. A lot of people talk the talk, but then they don't really put forth the actions. And I guess just to put that in, with an example, it'd be, I used to be too hard on the athletes, yelling on them, and I've really taken a step back from that. Those are some things that would make me cringe, just how hard I was on some of my athletes, and not taking into consideration, maybe they had a bad day. Who knows what's going on? Who knows this kid's upbringing? There's so many things that go into it. And so I guess there's things that I guess I don't want to say I would do them differently, because, if I think of as an athlete, maybe in high school I made this mistake that lost me a state championship, but then I go into college and I have a good career and I don't make that mistake anymore. There's always these lessons to be learned. And so same thing as a coach, it's like I can make this mistake here, and if I look back and say I changed that, well, then I wouldn't have all the benefits of what I've learned from that mistake moving forward. So I think it's all got to be kind of put in that perspective to keep us sane anyway.
Well, and that's so much. I mean, I don't know if I go through a podcast interview without that growth mindset of Carol Dweck, that book coming up. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about, is just, not dwelling on mistakes, but realizing that anytime we've made a mistake, we're going to be that much better at not making that mistake in the future. And that's part of the whole process. So I can tell that you're going to do really well in coaching, because you have a rare balance of, lots of the problems come in youth sports from egos from parents who want to, kind of vicariously live through their kids. I don't see that as much with successful people such as yourself, who had really successful high school and college athletes. I don't see that as much from them. But the problem is, a lot of times the people who had that success in high school and college then just take it for granted that they're going to be great coaches and don't do anything to further their own knowledge. And you have that great balance where you're going to not have that ego issue where you're going to have the confidence that you've been there, you've done that. But at the same time, I see you listening to podcasts, you're creating your own programs, you're out there learning. So that's such a healthy balance, and we need more coaches like that out there. So I love what you're doing, and just keep up the great work. Just loved hearing your story, and I love hearing more about wrestling too. Just like you talk about the uniqueness of it versus a lot of other team sports where you're relying on teammates and all that. Versus this one, it's really just all on you and your training and how passionate you are. And I know we talked even beforehand. You said the word passion is going to come up a lot, and I can see that in you. And that's what it ties in really well with wrestling. So this is great stuff. So that kind of wraps up the first quarter, leads us to the second, where let's dive into a little bit more about kind of teaching kids skills and how to achieve peak performance.
Sure.
I know this is an area you've even, and you were mentioning the previous podcast with Melody Schumann, where she talked about developmental levels a lot and appropriate developmental stages. I know that's kind of been part of your approach too. Even you've broken out, you have like a beginners program that's called Passion First. Talk to us a little bit about that kind of, teaching kids at the appropriate developmental stages.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that really is at the core of it. One of the things that I'm trying to do and trying to implement, and hoping other wrestling clubs and just overall the whole youth wrestling movement kind of takes note of this. And yeah, I mentioned to you before that when I listened to the Melody Schumann interview you had, it was like, you should have seen me. I'm in my car going, she's basically saying the things that are going on in my head, and she's like basically mapping out what I've been doing over here on my end with wrestling, with martial arts, which are very, if you go to my website, you'll read that I actually refer to it as a martial art, because wrestling really is considered, it's kind of fallen out of the mainstream as being one of the traditional martial arts, but it traditionally has been considered a martial art, a self-defense. And I think we've gotten away from a lot of that and turned it into a sport. And I think we do ourselves some justice by going back to some of the philosophies that they go to and getting back to a lot of the character development principles, the honor and respect and those things that are really taught more in some of the traditional martial arts. But going back to as far as an actual curriculum standpoint, that's exactly when, and it was interesting to hear some of the frustrations that she's had and some of that, because she put them into words when she would talk about the militaristic style and this old school way of doing things, and it's like this tough guy teaching attitude where the strong will survive and just kind of throw them in the fire. And if she thinks martial arts has that issue, wrestling is at times 100, because what happens in wrestling is, I think she was referring mostly to these kids just getting through the program and getting to the next belt level. Well, in wrestling, we don't even wait for them to get to a belt level. They go to practice for a couple of weeks, and then they're in tournaments. They're competing, and it's like I said, if you've never been to a youth wrestling tournament, it's chaos, it's madness for a well-adjusted adult to take in, much less a 4 or 5-year-old kid who's just like, what in the heck is going on here? There's yelling, there's whistles, you get thrown out there in this little skimpy singlet. And it's just so much for these guys to take in, and that's why youth wrestling has just a huge turnover rate. Every club you go into town's got 50 to 60 preschool, kindergarten, maybe first grade kids, but then you get to third, fourth, and fifth, it's like just a handful, and we just weed them out so fast because we throw them into this fire. And so, yeah, what we do with our program, what we've developed is the Passion First Wrestling Academy, and really it is structured more like one of these traditional martial arts programs where we have a set curriculum based on these different levels, where we're going to teach them some fitness skills, some strength and explosion, and also obviously some wrestling techniques, and just starting from the very base, the fundamentals, getting them to learn those. And then what they do is once they reach a certain competency, we will test them out. And what they get when they test out, since we don't have belts, we have other things like singlets and headgear and shorts and shirts. But what we do for our program is we have a shirt system. And so everybody starts out as a white shirt. Once they pass their white shirt curriculum, they move on to an orange shirt. Next, they get the green shirt, and then finally, once they've mastered all of these, basic skills, they graduate with their black shirt. And then what we do from there is then they have the option to join our competitive team, which is called the Wildcat Wrestling Club, based out of Millard West here in Omaha. And so we try to set these kids up for success by giving them a good solid base before they go out there and start competing, to give them the confidence. We're, really trying to set them up for success. And I think, I go out here every weekend and watch these little kids get thrown out on the mat. It's really, I don't have any interest in watching these kids that don't know what they're doing. It's kind of almost like human cockfighting to me.
Yep.
And I mean,
that's a great analogy. Yeah.
It's just, and I mean, I'll be blunt. It's basically child abuse in a lot of these situations. When you see the kids crying before the match, the parent pushes them out there and makes them do it, has a horrible experience, comes off the mat crying, and then as a parent, you're kind of forced in this world to either be like this bully and pressure them to make them fight through it and get good. But most parents, eventually don't want to put up or be that person or put up with, having to do that. And so they just let the kid quit wrestling. And in my opinion, that's a shame, because there's just so many of these little kids that maybe could have, probably would have enjoyed the sport, or at least had a better experience if it was just set up for them differently, where they could take a more gradual approach. And really, we have our guiding principles that we really stick to with our program and kind of direct how we do everything. And the third one is each individual's experience matters. And that's something that I believe is not practiced in the majority of youth wrestling clubs, where it's just kind of this herd mentality where we get 50 kids in a room, maybe 2 or 3 of them are naturally aggressive and really take to the sport. There's probably a bunch that are kind of in the middle, and then there's some that probably don't need to be in wrestling. But I'm trying to get more of those ones in the middle to stick around. And I think by taking this slower approach, we can do that and not weed so many of them out so quickly, and then just be left with those handful of kids that really naturally embrace the sport.
Man, that's all kinds of nuggets in there. I love what you're talking about, the kids in the middle. I feel like most youth sports, that's the problem, is those kids in the middle. I've seen it in basketball like crazy. The best 2 or 3 kids on the team get all the attention, and the kids in the middle, number 4 through 8, just get completely ignored. And that's a great focus. And I love that you're focusing on those kids and trying to keep them loving the sport, keep them interested, keep them passionate about it. And the other thing I'll say is I love hearing this system, what you and Melody have shared about these systems of very organized, graduated levels that they have to move through to move on. It's just in my mind as I picture this, it's just such a confidence builder to let these kids struggle through it and work through it and then master a skill and then move on and then, get pushed even further. Versus, like you said, then, having 50 of them just, out there, okay, go wrestle each other. And, where's the self-confidence built in that? Where's the satisfaction from having worked through an activity? Such good stuff. Here's going to be my plug for wrestling. And I think I shared this on a recent podcast, but I'm going to share it again because it really made me think of it with you talking, is that I had a guy pull me aside when I had my son involved in all team sports. I think it was basketball, lacrosse, football. And he said, hey, Craig, you should think about maybe one of those 3 sports dropping and do some type of individual sport, whether that be swimming or a track and field or wrestling or something. He said, but there's something to be said for when it's all on you and it's you against the clock or it's you against the other guy. There's no coach opinion involved. I'm going to start these 5 kids because I like them better or because I know their parents. He said, and I didn't follow that advice and I regret it. Just hearing you talk reminds me of that, is that there's such value in these kids being able to go out and just, wherever they want to achieve, it's up to them. It's not, there's no politics involved. There's, the mat doesn't lie, the clock doesn't lie. There's sports that it certainly makes sense. So, good stuff on how you're setting that up.
And just to add on to that real quick, I've been doing this program because for about 2 years, I started it up on my own. But the previous club I was at actually implemented a program similar to this, which I kind of helped them develop and, since have branched out. But it is so powerful, and that's what really gave me the confidence to really step out and do my own thing, because I would see the feedback from parents, from the kids, and it was just like, instead of going out and all of a sudden you're a winner or you're a loser right off the bat, these guys are all going to be winners for, 6 to 8 months as they make these achievements. And gosh, that's so powerful. Even if they don't end up wrestling another day after this program, just to see them reach these goals. And it's really cool to see how it develops throughout even the team, where a lot of these kids kind of come in the white shirts and they don't really kind of get it and know what's going on or really care, they're just kind of out there. And then it's so powerful after we do each testing, and all of a sudden one of their buddies comes in with a new shirt, and they're like, oh, okay, and just to see them figure it out, and then they start taking this personal responsibility, like, okay, what do I need to do to get that, and see them work for these goals. It's just really cool how it keeps evolving and kind of working that way with keeping them motivated. And so,
yeah,
very, very cool.
Is there any? So, do you guys do any kind of ceremony, like when somebody graduates to a level? Is there kind of a ceremony to kind of recognize them publicly?
Yeah, we do. We do. Well, what we do is we have once a month is we have our testing dates, and so basically it's within the testing. As we do that, at the end of it, we'll do a little talk on each of the guys and some of the things they've improved on and some of that stuff. And all the parents and grandparents, everybody's invited to come there, and we clap for them. And you can just see them; they're just beaming. We take their pictures right away and put them up on the website and on Facebook and give them all sorts of congrats there. And you can just see. And then all of a sudden, the parents get on there and they start commenting about how proud their son was and this, and it really just keeps building about. That we're doing something cool and we're doing something the right way, and it's really having a great effect on these kids. It's going to last past wrestling, past sports. They've got a goal. Okay, here's my goal. What do I have to do to achieve it? Okay, and then they kind of put these steps in place and they do it. And that's stuff that's going to last, their whole lives, and that's what's really cool to me.
Man, absolutely. So you've listened to the podcast before. Like my favorite quotes, the Frederick Douglass one. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Can you think of a specific kid where maybe he's graduated one of these levels, or maybe a kid that was just struggling? Can you think of a kid, and you don't have to mention him by name, but just somebody who was struggling with that, and how you were able to kind of turn things around for him?
Oh yeah, I mean this program really just it's great for that. It sets these guys up, and the thing is too that there's no rush. When you're ready to take responsibility and get to the next level, we're going to keep coaching you and keep helping you get there. And so, gosh, I see a lot of that. There's not a whole lot of kids that jump out at me. I guess in regards to this program, when I think back of that, on something like that, I really think back to my first stint coaching in high school. But there was an athlete that I became really close with right away, and it's just really because I saw a lot of myself in him. He was a really good athlete, but just a loose cannon, and I was kind of the same way in high school, where just emotionally and just all over the place sometimes whenever I would be faced with some kind of stress or something that upset me. And I really took him under my wing, and I didn't try to change him or anything, but I think I just had a special relationship with him because I saw him in me, and I didn't want to change him because I also realized that, some of the rough upbringing that I had and some of the adversity I went through are what made me successful down the line as a wrestler, or gave me the perspective I have today. So, going back to the things that you can change, I wouldn't change the trouble I got in or this team I got kicked off or whatever it is that happened in my life, because that changes everything. That changes, it's the whole Back to the Future thing, where if you change something, in the past, everything else changes the way it was. So, but yeah, I guess, one thing I will mention is I do feel I have a soft spot for some of the kids that come in there that aren't naturally athletic. Maybe some of the kids that are overweight, and some of those guys that are coming in there, and who knows why their parent threw them in there, and who knows if they even want to be there. But I really do feel like I make an extra effort to take them under my wing and give them the extra support and encouragement to keep with it and just to do their best. We're not judging them against the other kids. I'm just judging, if your name's Joe, I'm just judging Joe against Joe. And so as long as Joe shows up every week ready to work and ready to get a little bit better every week, that's all I'm worried about. And I think with some of these kids who, just haven't had success in athletics or for whatever reason, it's real easy for them to find an excuse not to succeed. And so I think I really try to, I think I really have a soft spot for those kids and really try to give them more attention. And so not a whole lot of particular ones, but I think overall that's something I'm trying to do consistently all the time.
It sounds like you're doing it with all the kids you're involved with. So I can see that is definitely a passion of yours. That's good stuff. All right. Great first half, Coach. Are you ready to finish strong and bring home the W in the second half?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Let's do it. Let's talk a little bit about developing kind of teamwork and culture. And this is very interesting in light of wrestling being a little bit of an individual sport. What do you do with a team to kind of develop kind of that teamwork environment? I mean, I know obviously with the lower levels with the shirts and all that, that's building camaraderie, but what else can you do in an individual sport like wrestling to really grow teamwork and community within that team?
Well, yeah, you're right. It is unique because it is a very individual sport. But anybody that's wrestled, on any high level or extensively, you will hear them say that the team is very, very, very important because really you can't. The preparation that it takes to be successful in wrestling, you can't just do that by yourself in a room and on a mat. You got to have support. You got to have good teammates. And it really, I think, lends itself to creating bonds, and all sports do in general, I guess, team sports, individual sports, but there's just so much heart and soul and hard work that has to go into this sport to be successful. I mean, you create a bond, with your teammates, you create a bond with your competitors, even the people you battle against. You just have this common respect for each other because the sacrifices and the hard work that we put in there. And the other thing with wrestling, we do a lot of, there's long days. We do a lot of traveling. We're sitting in gyms together for long days. And so you start to see the kids and you start encouraging them to support each other and watch each other's matches. And it really does keep building. So I think there is a very strong team aspect to it as well. And I know just going back to, all of these things is really just setting that groundwork of making a culture that revolves around, positive character. And really, whenever we talk about our rules, I always just say, we have a couple little rules that specific ones, but really our rule is just to follow the golden rule, and that kind of encompasses mostly everything. Now, we do have some specific curriculum tied into character development. I call the 6 pillars of character. And we refer back to those quite a bit, and it's respect, attitude, passion, integrity, discipline, and honesty. And really, those are so over-encompassing that if everybody's really kind of trying to use those for their building blocks and really recognizing those as the values that we turn to in tough times and when we make decisions, I think just you keep building that culture, and that it goes across coaches and parents across the board. I think just setting that standard and being consistent with it, that's what's going to build the framework for a good family environment and building strong teams.
Have you ever had a team where things seemed like they were kind of going the wrong way? Maybe there was 2 competitors that were just going at it, fighting for a certain weight class or something. Ever had a situation like that you kind of had to figure out how to address?
I really haven't. I just that's one thing with wrestling is it all kind of sorts itself out. There's not a whole lot of politics or black and white. You go out there, you square up, and whoever's the better man that day or kid, I should say, is going to come out on top. And so, I've seen that in a lot of the other team sports, especially as we get to the more competitive levels, and there's all these different politics and who's dad's friends with the coach and this and that. But, we have something, there's a saying that goes around in all sports, but in wrestling, I think it gets thrown out a lot with steel sharpens steel. And so, we really try to paint this picture at practice that we're all here together, working for each other. And so we need each person to give their best effort back and forth, and that's what's going to make each other better. And so even the kid that, maybe he's not the hammer, he's the nail this practice, but he still needs to give his best effort. He's making that other kid better by giving his best effort and vice versa. And so, I haven't ran into a whole lot of that yet. And the other thing is at these youth tournaments, there's not like just one spot for each weight class or something like that in high school. So I can have 3 or 4 kids in the same bracket. And again, everything sorts itself out. So we don't really have to position ourselves like that right now. But when that time comes, that's the beauty of wrestling. It's just so clear cut. You go out there and one person wins, one person loses, and so you don't have as much of that probably maybe as some of the other sports.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. All right, well, I hear the whistle. It's time for the 4th quarter. Time for our 2-minute drill, so let's finish up strong here. They say all coaches borrow or steal their best ideas. What's one of the best things you've learned or stolen from another coach?
Oh, gosh, yeah, that's obviously true. I mean, and that's just part of learning. I don't know. I mean, you could call it stealing, but, it's just if you're not stealing, if you're not learning. But I do think I also balance that out with a lot of fresh ideas. My brain just doesn't turn off. It's If I'm not doing my job or spending time with family, I'm thinking about wrestling and coaching and how to do things better. And so I do, a lot of times I think I steal something, but I also try to put it in the framework of my philosophies and try to figure out, even if it is a good idea, how I can personalize it or make it something unique a little bit. But, when I think about that question, I guess the big thing is more just an over-encompassing general philosophy and going back to that culture. And I'll mention a legendary wrestling coach in Nebraska. He now coaches down at in Maryville University, but his name is Coach Mike Denny. He was a long-time head wrestling coach at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, very successful. And you can't go to you can't go to any high school, youth, whatever it may be, wrestling tournaments in this state without having several of the coaches that have come underneath him. And so I was very fortunate to have two of his wrestlers, former wrestlers, as my coaches, both in high school and in college. And so he never actually coached me directly, but I think that's where a lot of my philosophies trace back to this, to a lot of the things that he set up. He was somebody who really preached the importance of character and the character first, and that's how you build, and that's where things begin. He is really big into creating a family environment where everybody cares for each other, and I got to see that, and how powerful that was secondhand from, my college coach who really implemented a lot of those same values. And going back to that golden rule, I talk about the golden rule a lot because I think it's so important and so overlooked, but he was the definition of respect and the golden rule, because this is a coach that actually recruited me out of high school to come wrestle for him in college, and I didn't. I went to the rival school across the state and competed with him for 5 years, and there wasn't one time we walked by each other in the hallway where he wouldn't come over, shake my hand, ask me how I'm doing, and treated me the same. And I've seen him do that to many athletes, across the board, regardless of what team they are on. And I just always, it took a while for it to kind of click and for me to realize how cool that was. But, the more as I look back and think about him and the way he's carried himself, that's something that I'll say I steal, and I'd be proud to steal, because he's built an excellent tradition of just creating not just good wrestlers, but good quality people going out there and spreading the message. So that's where I would point back to Coach Mike Denny, the legendary wrestling coach, for a lot of my positive philosophies and what I'm trying to do with my program here.
Man, that's awesome. And it's so cool to hear about guys like that who just have these chain and, of people down the road that they've affected. And like you said, that this guy, Mike, has had this, effect where he's either coached or, had coaches underneath him that have learned from him and just spread that all across. It's so cool to see that ripple effect when it's in a positive way, and how guys like that have impact. So shout out to Coach Denny. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
And what you shared, it was really interesting. I thought in this past weekend's AFC Championship game afterwards, watching Peyton Manning and Bill Belichick, when they came up and talked to each other. First of all, that Belichick, after a really tough loss, would even take the time.
Yeah.
Say what you want about Belichick. A lot of people don't like him, but he was very respectful. He didn't just run off the field, and go cry in the locker room. He took the time to to seek out Peyton and talk to him, and then to hear what Peyton said to him. They actually had him mic'd up or whatever, where you could hear him to tell him, hey, this is my last rodeo. This might be my last rodeo. It's been a pleasure. That's really cool, because if you think back even on the history where they said, Peyton was paranoid of his locker room when he was in New England. He, those two had a heated rivalry, and really
Sure.
the Patriots stood in the way of a lot of, a lot more Super Bowls probably for Peyton. And just the respect level. I think what you're talking about in wrestling and with Coach Denny, just that respect for your competitor. That's the way sports need to be, and that's how you have to be as a coach, because if you're not that way, there's no way your players are going to be. But they watch you, and when you can, a kid on the other team makes a nice play, and you say, hey, good job, buddy, or something when he's going by, or you talk to him after the game and treat him with respect as if they're your own player. That's such a valuable lesson that we all as coaches need to emulate. So I really appreciate you sharing that one from Coach Denny.
Absolutely.
All right. That's great stuff. So as we wrap up here, last couple things. A lot of the coaches listening to this are mom, dad coaches that are kind of like you and me, working full time, but then doing this, trying to learn coaching on the side. I know you said you listen to some different podcasts on coaching. I know you've read a lot on coaching. If you just had a couple things to a couple things to share to say, hey, here's some other good resources that I've found, other podcasts, other books, anything, or other websites, anything that jumps out at you that you could point other coaches to that you found as a good resource?
Yeah, oh gosh, there's so many of them out there nowadays. I don't know how coaches did it without the internet. Maybe that's why we're just making these advances and trying to fix some of the mistakes from past generations. They just didn't have as much access. But yeah, I could probably spend the next 20 minutes telling you all the different directions I go. But if I really had to pinpoint some of the really, really great ones, I'm a real big follower and believer in the Positive Coaching Alliance.
Okay.
I really love the work that they do, the resources they put out, the trainings. I just think they really have it going in the right direction and are doing things the right way. So if anybody's not in touch with them, whether it be a coach, a parent, anybody involved, that's a great one to bookmark and put on your radar.
Yep.
And then, like I said, like you mentioned, I am into a lot of the different podcasts. Obviously, yours has been a big one. I've taken a lot of good information from these coaches. I'm usually in the car, so I'm trying to take note and make a quick note, and then I usually can't remember what that means because it's scribbled, and I have to go back and look. But I also enjoy Janice Meredith. She does a good job with some of her information for parents. I enjoy a lot of the stuff that she does. From a wrestling standpoint, I would just point to USA Wrestling. They do a great job with their website, and so anybody who is a wrestling coach and needs a little guidance, they have a great coaching curriculum broken down step by step for techniques, and so that's a great one I would point to. And then, going off of the coaching topic, I really, really am a big believer in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and that book by Stephen Covey. I think that really shapes a lot of the groundwork of just helps kind of sort through life and try to make sense of things and how to put things in some kind of order. And so I recommend that to anybody who will listen. Is that the seven steps of highly effective people. I just think that is great stuff there, and very just deep, well thought out structure to life and how to live a good life and try to make sense of everything. And then lastly, one last one I'll put as far as more recently trying to put this whole program together myself and the business side of things and just being a leader. I really like the book Entre Leadership from Dave Ramsey. It just has a lot of great information. I know a lot of people know him as the financial guy on the radio, which he is, but he has a great book, and it's also a great podcast that they have too, Entre Leadership, where, man, I'm telling you, just about being a leader, doing things right, treating people the right way. I really respect the way that he's built that business up, and to hear him share his story and how it all came along, that's something I'm really trying to incorporate and model as I try to develop my own program here.
Yeah, man, awesome recommendations. And just a reminder to our audience, I'll have all the stuff that Robert mentioned in our show notes. Just go to winningyouthcoaching.com/podcasts, and I'll put links to everything you mentioned today. Bunch of great recommendations there, a lot of kind of foundational resources, and then even resources to kind of take your coaching to the next level. So great stuff. Well, so just a reminder, so your website, you get to it wrestlingwithcharacter.com, right?
Correct, yep, wrestlingwithcharacter.com, or you can go to Facebook, is Wrestling with Character. Pretty active on Twitter. It's at WWC365, and emails are on there if anybody needs to get a hold of us. We don't have anything to sell, but I do have a resources tab on the website, which is broken down between wrestling, coaching, and parents, and some of those ones I just listed off there are all on there with links, and I think I've done a good job of putting together a pretty all-inclusive resource there for people to go to and find all sorts of good information for whatever specific category they're looking for.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I appreciate you including me on that resources tab of the Winning Youth Coaching podcast on there. So,
well, you bet. That was a no-brainer.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, so guys, definitely go check out wrestlingwithcharacter.com or look them up on Facebook or Twitter. Thank you so much, Coach Robert. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and resources. The Youth Coaching Nation thanks you. So, coaches, have a great practice with your team tonight. And remember what Vince Lombardi said, winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. So choose to make winning and doing the right thing your habit starting today. Thank you so much, Robert Murphy.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
All right, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please check out more episodes and everything we have to offer on our website, winningyouthcoaching.com. And you can find the show notes from today's episode on winningyouthcoaching.com/podcasts. Also, as a reminder, go to the website to sign up for our weekly email updates, where you're going to find quick tips on how to make winning your habit. A new feature we've added recently to make it easier to sign up for our weekly coaching tips, you can just text 67076 and enter WYC and a space and your email address, and we'll get you all signed up. So again, you just text WYC, a space, and your email address to 67076. We're in the middle of an 8-week series titled Be a Great Game Day Coach, so sign up for the emails to check it out. As always, if you like the show, and if you have 60 seconds, please jump over to iTunes and give it a 5-star rating and write a quick review to keep the momentum rolling. If you do, I'll try to give you a shout-out. Like today, I wanted to give a shout-out to Mr. Pensbury, and actually we just want to read his review. I really appreciate it. It says, "This podcast is a game changer in the world of youth sports coaching. Each guest brings a great amount of knowledge and insight to the table. The easy breakdown of each section of the show gives the listener pieces to look forward to. By far the best coaching podcast around." Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pensbury. Really appreciate that great review. Thanks again to all of you for listening. Have a great day and go bring home the W.